Good morning, everyone, and welcome. I am the Reverend Christine Dance, and it is my great honor to be serving the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Phoenix as your minister. Welcome to Sunday worship. Welcome home. The Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Phoenix strives to be a spiritual community for our time, focused on diverse theological perspectives, radical inclusion, and knowing that issues of justice and equity shape everything that we do. With a special awareness for those who have been historically marginalized, we welcome all of every race, class, ethnicity, immigration status, sexual orientation, gender identity, religious background, mental and physical ability and disability. We welcome you, your whole self, your family, just as you are, as we build a community of kindness and caring, of courage and of hope. This morning, we have gathered to contemplate the journey, the turning of our generations, the astonishing moment of history that we're in right now. We turn to each other and we turn to our definition of higher love to contemplate how we respond to these extraordinary times. We've gathered here in search of answers to hard questions, in search of understanding, in search of community. We've come in search of hope and healing. Let this be a time of searching, but also of connection and wisdom. I invite you to grab a chalice or a candle from your home as we prepare to light our chalice. This week, and as many weeks as we can, we are inviting different families to light our chalice, and their chalice at home. This is a great way to see our kids in particular, as we so miss seeing their faces on Sunday morning. This morning, we are joined by McCall, Lalana, Annalise, Onyx, and Ethan. Please light your chalice and recite our covenant together with them.
We invite you to grab a chalice or candle as we light our chalice and our candle in our home with our puppy cats and loved ones. As we light our chalice and recite the covenant together.
Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to share our strength and fellowship, thus do we covenant. Yay. Yay.
Yeah, I don't care.
Thank you to the family. How wonderful to see you all. Let me introduce our worship team for you. We have, we need you to mute, Benji. There we go. We have our music director, Benji Messer. We've got our worship associate, Gary Ezzell, our pianist, Mary Cota, and our director of children's ministries, Katie Resendez. Behind the scene, we have Justin Walgren handling our AV, and Brad Chapman is our moderator today, who is managing the chat. And Stephanie Bridell Vigil is also helping us. Like last week, our chat is open. So please feel free to chat with everyone or just your panelists during the service. Feel free to say hi or comment or ignore all of it. We also invite you to check in to UUCP on social media with the hashtag UUAnywhere. A couple announcements about the life of our community. We have Vespers back at 7:30 on Thursday, but please know that we're also starting to record it so you can access it anytime, and particularly this Thursday for those of you who might be watching the Democratic National Convention. It's at 7:30 on Thursdays. I wanted to let you know that Death Cafe is moving to once a month starting on Thursday, the 27th of August at 11 a.m. And We also wanted to let you know that this week we have a large shipment heading up to the Navajo Nation. Thank you to everyone who has contributed food, goods, money to help our siblings up there who have been struggling with COVID and other just basic needs. We are also working with youth who are continuing good work on the reservation. Continue to watch Compass for details there. And as school starts this week, please consider donating supplies to our partner Maryland School. I also wanted to call out that many of you have inquired what you can do about helping to support our UU principle of supporting the democratic process in this important election year. Our UU The Vote organizers have a phone bank opportunity that's listed in Compass. It's something small and tangible that is accessible and fun. And you can see everything on Compass, our electronic newsletter, which is back to twice a week. You can sign up for Compass on our website, which is phoenixuu.org. So as we move to our offering, this is Share the Plate Sunday. Once a month, we designate 1 week for all of our offering to go to a community organization. We believe this act reflects our values and encourages the spirit of generosity. This month, our Share the Plate partner is Camelot Therapeutic Horsemanship. For 37 years, Camelot Therapeutic Horsemanship has provided weekly free riding lessons to Phoenix Valley children and adults with disabilities. Each student is supported by a riding instructor and as many as 5 caring volunteers overseeing the lesson, the student's safety, their needs and abilities. They're starting their 38th year this September at their wheelchair accessible Scottsdale Ranch, and all the precautions will be taken for everyone's safety during the pandemic. The funding from our collection and from what they receive is used to offset expenses associated with the care and maintenance of their therapy horses. You can learn more about them by clicking the link in the chat, and you can donate by text and by our website under the Share the Plate pull down, or by sending us an old-fashioned check. We are so grateful for your generosity and so grateful for the great work of Camelot.
I'd like to lead us this morning in a great Black spiritual about how we keep pushing to make this world better. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. Sometimes it doesn't seem like that's quite working, trying to make the world better, but this song says that it is. We're climbing. Maybe it's just that the moral arc of the universe is long. The lyrics will be in the chat. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing on. Every rung goes higher. Every rung goes higher, higher. Every rung goes higher, higher. Every rung goes higher, higher. We are climbing on. Every round a generation. Every round is a generation. Every round is a generation. Every round is a generation. We are climbing on. If I stumble, will you help me? If I stumble, me. If I stumble, will you help me? We are climbing on. I said we are climbing on. Thanks all.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Katie Resendez. I'm the Director of Children's Ministry here at UUC Phoenix. Do you remember that toy, Jacob's Ladder? Did you ever play with? It's wooden blocks that are together with a ribbon, and they stack together. And then when you pull them apart, you can flick one and it goes clack, 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 and it changes direction. And then you grab the other one and it goes clack, 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 clack. That was one of my favorite toys growing up, and it's still one of my favorite things to play with. But it's served me different throughout life. I don't know if I ever saw it when I was an infant, but as a toddler, I can remember watching someone else play with one, and I loved the noise of it, and that clack still sticks with me in my ears. And then as I got older, it was watching and seeing how they flipped and figuring out what that movement was like. And then, to be honest, it wasn't until I was in my 20s and I got to be around a wood shop a lot that I started to figure out how they worked and play around with them and make a little cardboard model. And I never made a wooden one, so it never made that clack, but watching and seeing how it came together. And now when my days are busy with kids and work and home and everything, I like to pick one up just to fiddle with. And a lot of you know that I like to keep things in my hands so that my hands don't get in the way when I'm talking or doing other things. But it's definitely been a toy that's stuck with me. There are a lot of different things that go with us through our stages in life. And we move through things different and we experience things different depending on what age we are. Like, did you know, or do you know, what the age is when you start to know whether your body is warm or cold? And you can honestly say, I feel cold. Do you know how old you are when your taste buds start to decline? Or what is the point in our lives when you figure out that you and your parents are actually different people? Do you know when it's easiest to change our minds? All of these are pretty cool and pretty amazing to think about, especially when we're in a community where we're so many different generations and we think about how we interact with one another and what our expectations are of each other, and also what our expectations are of ourselves. I think about our ministry and how this is just the beginning of our second year in our newest ministry with Rev Christine and her leadership. Last year was like being an infant. When we problem solve as infants, it's not about coming up with a great big plan. It's about going, oh, things around me are happening. And it's initial awareness. So as a community last year, that was things like, oh, we have a settled minister now. She's still here. She's still here. Oh, she's part of us. And becoming that awareness. And that's a lot of what being an infant is about, is understanding the senses that are coming in. In our toddlerhood, which is where we are now as a congregation, we problem solve by trial and error. We touch something, that didn't work out. We try it again, it still didn't work. We watch someone else do it and we see whether or not it worked. And at this stage, we may not even try what they do. We might, but we just keep trying, trial and error, again and again. And I think that this year, as a congregation, might be our toddler year. Think about how we have gotten kind of used to Zoom, and now we're in the point of experimenting. What happens if we turn the chat on? What happens if we leave it off? What happens if we start a scouting program in children's ministry? What if it doesn't work? What if, it's that try and come back to safety and try and come back to safety. And we're so lucky as a community that we have safety. We have each other to come back to as we go into this toddler year. What about us as individuals, though, as we develop and think about problem solving throughout our ages and across this amazing multi-gen community that we are. Toddlerhood, childhood. So childhood problem solving is looking about what you can control yourself to change the outcome. What's the thing that you can stamp your feet about, or what's the thing that you can change the color about? Finding those little pieces that you have finite control over and seeing how that changes the outcome for the problem. As we enter into emergent adulthood, that late teen, early 20s age, it's about deciding what information to keep and hold and what information to disregard. We create our filters at those ages, which is probably also why it's known as not just the information age, but it's also the problem finding age. Going out and figuring out what those problems are or making them for yourself. And those of you who have gone through that time of late adolescence to early 20s, you probably remember your problem finding stage quite a bit. Then there's that 30s and 40s. And did you know that in your 30s and 40s, almost all problem solving is dependent on past experience? Unless you do conscious work to shift that, all the decisions you make, all the problem solving steps you do are going to be based on what we consider wisdom. Something I did before turned out this way, and therefore, when I make this decision now, it's going to go this way, which is really important, and wisdom is good, but you can imagine is probably problematic in a whole lot of ways. In our 50s and early 60s, we actually look to our community more. We look at either social influence, or we look at the impact we can have through our power that we've established. And we look to those as our primary tools for problem solving. What is our role or even our authority in the community? And when we're in those ages, if we don't feel like we have authority and we start to feel powerless, we can end up with a lot of conflict in our lives. And then the coolest thing I found out, because I didn't know this and it was new information, probably because I'm not at this stage yet, but in later adulthood, after our mid-60s, we become the most responsive we are to our surroundings, to what's immediately happening. As some of our senses and things start to shift and change, we begin to be very, very observant of what's going on around us, of who's interacting with who. And in problem solving and decision making, we are the most flexible as we are ever in our lives when we are in our late adulthood. Can you imagine? So I think about our congregation and that path that we're on and how we're just at this beginning toddler stage. And how cool is it going to be to move through each of those stages together? And how amazing is it that we have people at all of those life stages in our community right now, so that we can keep coming back to the safety that our toddler congregation needs right now. Please remember that you are so very loved and so very powerful, and have a wonderful week.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Katie, for such a great message. It is the time when we share the joys and sorrows of our community. Being together, it is good to share and to support each other and to connect. So I invite you to write any joys or sorrows that you want our community to have in the chat. You can send it to everyone or just to panelists. Please put your name at the beginning so I know who it is. And if you want it to be private and read just by me, go ahead and put the words private, and so I can hold it in my heart. And while you are entering your joys and sorrows, let me mention a few in our world and in our community. On August 17th this week, it is the anniversary of the 19th Amendment, giving women, the white women particularly, let's note that, the right to vote. We will be celebrating that next week, along with discussing different elements of the suffrage right and journey and how they relate to us as Unitarian Universalists. I wanted to let you know in our community that Peggy Payden is in the hospital. So Peggy went in a few weeks ago for sciatica, and the pain medicines created a whole string of their own challenges. So she's had a couple of surgeries and is still in the hospital, and will probably be moving to a extended care facility to get her strength back in a few days. So Peggy is asking, she's still regaining her strength, just she's asking for people to hold off on calls for right now. We'll let you know when she's up for those. And I want to give a special shout out to small group ministry, and particularly our senior women's group, who conducted what I'm now calling the great search for Peggy Payden last week. They noticed that she wasn't there, and they were concerned, and they looked all over both the virtual and the physical world of Phoenix until they found her in the hospital. So senior women, you are my aspiration, and thank you for caring. I also wanted to share a joy that last Saturday we had our first socially distant masked wedding here on the grounds of UUCP. There were just the couple, 3 witnesses and myself in masks and fully 6 feet apart, but I want to introduce our newlyweds of Christopher Mullally and Lisa Gorski, who is now Lisa Mullally. And it was a fabulous thing that their first date was actually here at UUCP. So now to the joys and sorrows of our community. So Francis Wiggett says that he started a new job, looking forward to guiding new students around the online Paradise Valley Community College experience. Congratulations. So this is great news. I'm so glad that you put it. McCall says, I proposed marriage to Onyx and they said yes. So congratulations to you and the whole family. Shelley, Keith, Leo, and Chloe are glad that after a long cross-country drive that included being robbed in Texas and a sprained wrist and cast for Leo, to be back in Rhode Island for a few months. 70 degrees and raining. Oh dear. I'm glad and concerned, and we'll need to hear the story. So we have a joy from Navi that we had fun at our UUCP Dungeons and Dragons group. That sounded like a blast. Linda Dean says it's a joy to be in the mountains where it is beautiful and cooler. Jen says, my daughter is progressing and gaining strength, both physically and emotionally, from her eating disorder and depression, anxiety. Please pray for her. We will. Bill Snowden and Joan Gale say that there's a joy of having a Zoom call to one of my nephews this morning. We saw their kids, who are 3 and 5, for the first time in a couple of years. Kathy Kopak says, my granddaughter is at Notre Dame as a freshman. I am grateful for the care and attention the campus is giving to their research-based approach in that community. And Sarah London and Hannah Montgomery say, we get to move into our new house on Tuesday, August 25th. We are looking forward to a walkable neighborhood, a big yard for Hannah to play in, and a single-story living. Congratulations. Stuart Roden says, hope and prayers that the ASU community will be safe as it unnecessarily returns to campus instead of being 100% online for fall term. And yes, we are so sending for teachers, administrators, parents, and students who are struggling with what to do with school and the choices that they've got between bad and worse decisions. And Beverly Hart says, my joy is that Camelot attended Howard University as I did, and she is also a sorority sister, Alpha Kappa Kappa. So I thought it was Alpha Kappa Alpha. I might be wrong, but I'm sure, Bev, you know this better. Katie Pacelli Klinger says, a joy that Rob started his new job at Phoenix College online. So happy to be here. We're glad that you all are here as well. So much going on. Please join me in the spirit of prayer and meditation with the words of Reverend Alice Anacheka Naisman, who currently serves as minister of the UU Church in Massachusetts. In a world so filled with brokenness and sorrow, it would be easy to lose ourselves in never-ending grief, to be choked by our outrage, to feel paralyzed by the enormity of suffering, to feel our hearts squeeze tight with hopelessness. Instead, this morning, let us simply breathe together as we hold our hearts open, breathing in as our hearts fill with compassion, breathing out as we pray for healing in our world and in our lives. Breathing in, opening ourselves to the transforming power of love. Breathing out as we pray for peace in our world and in our lives. Breathing in as we hold hope in our hearts. Breathing out as we pray for justice in our world and in our lives. May we know our strength. May we be filled with courage. May our love flow from us into this world. Breathe with me, please. Breathing in, we are the prayer. Breathing out, we are the healing. Breathing in, we are the love. Breathing out, we are the peace. Breathing in, we are the hope. Breathing out, we are the justice. May we know our strength. May we be filled with courage. May our love flow from us into this world. Amen. And blessed be. May it ever be so.
I have a video choir piece to share with you that I created with many UUCP members and friends. It's about being on a journey and trying to get home. Coronavirus can feel like a long journey, and our choir misses our home in the sanctuary, so you'll see our blue choir chairs in the video. But we also dedicate this song to the many migrants who are literally trying to get to somewhere they can call home.
Lord, I'm climbing high mountains trying to get home. Lord, I'm climbing high mountains trying to get home. trials, trying to get home. Lord, I'm having hard trials, trying to get home. Lord, I'm having hard trials, having hard trials. Lord, I'm having hard trials, trying to get home. Lord, I wait sometimes weary, trying to get home. Lord, my way sometimes weary, trying to get home. Lord, my way sometimes weary, way sometimes weary. Lord, my way sometimes weary, trying to get home. Lord, I'm climbing high mountains, trying to get home. Lord, I'm climbing high mountains, trying to get home. Lord, I'm climbing high mountains, climbing high mountains. Lord, I'm climbing high mountains, trying to get home. Lord, I'm climbing high mountains, trying to get home.
Today's topic got me to wondering, are we poised for a great turning? It certainly seems likely, even necessary. We are definitely in the middle of one of the great cultural revolutions, and one that is happening rapidly. The agricultural revolution took a few thousand years, and the industrial revolution a couple of hundred. And now this digital revolution is happening in decades. Up until the time I was 6 years old, the Earth had one satellite, the moon. Now how many? We're still in the middle of this, of course, likely on the verge of bigger changes, perhaps at a tipping point, and we don't know what's going to happen. We have hopes and fears and lots of doubts. It could be paralyzing. But I came across an insight recently on a podcast that was helpful to me. And as an aside, how illustrative is that word podcast? iPods are all but gone. But back to the insight. Once you realize that you don't know what's going to happen, once you set aside any illusion of control, you're free to act, to decide what seems most right to you and to go for it. What will happen, que sera, sera. Now, this is not a new insight. It goes back thousands of years. This is what Krishna tells Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. The responsibility is to be true to yourself and act. The gods, powers beyond your control, will decide the outcome. Don't be suspended between to be or not to be. Act. Take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing, well, oppose them. Don't count on the end. There may never be an end, but there may be a turning. And so, I do what I can do and try to have faith that the little that I can do will help to bend the arc.
Thank you, Gary. Today's service is called In This Great Turning, and as you're hearing from Katie and Gary, we're talking about the turning in our history and in our worlds and cycles. But the term is taken from the Mamuse song, We Shall Be Known. The primary line of this song is, in this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. Lead in love. I'm proposing that that could be our theme for the year. Lead in love. With each other as we care for each other without being physically together. Lead in love as we figure out together how to get through this time. Lead in love through this election. Lead in love as we fight to dismantle white supremacy. The song we're going to hear next was used for UU the Vote and has actually a number of images from Arizona. See if you can spot them. It was used for the entire national UU the Vote initiative, but it is applicable for all we do. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. UUCP, lead in love.
We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle around to tend these vibes. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time. To tend these vibes. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the
So what is the event that defined your generation? The greatest generation was defined by World War II. Many either served or had family members that served. And I don't think there was a person in the country that wasn't impacted by World War II in some way. It led to a generation that respected sacrifice and service. My children were born in the mid-90s. They tell me that the defining moment for their generation was 9/11. They were 6 and 4 years old enough to know that something really tragic and important had happened, and young enough not to really understand the magnitude. But they don't remember not living in a post 9/11 world. They have a different concept of evil than I did growing up, and a cynicism that I wished that I could have protected them from. What was the defining event of your generation? Back in 1997, William Strauss and Neil Howe released a book called The Fourth Turning, An American Prophecy. It looks at the history of Anglo-American culture, and just to be clear, that this looks at our history from a white European-based culture, and notes that there are cycles of 80 to 100-year generational cycles. And each of those cycles is divided into 4 20 to 25-year cycles. Each cycle starts with a big crisis that leads to a climax transformation time in the middle, and then ends with another big crisis, again leading to the next cycle of transformation. So they are thinking that the just turning, it's not a linear process, it's more of a cycle process. So for example, the model starts with the War of the Roses in the mid-15th century, which led to the climax of the Protestant Revolution, and ended with the disorienting defeat of the Spanish Armada. Or you can fast forward 300 years, where the transformation came after the Revolutionary War. The climax came with that transcendental movement, and it ended with the Civil War. Each of these cycles is 80 to 100 years. So within these cycles, like I said, there are 4 turnings defined by Strauss and Howe. The first turning is an era when institutions are strong and individualism is weak. Society feels confident about where it wants to go collectively, even if it's somewhat stifled by the conformity. America's most recent first turning was post-World War II, that American high beginning in 1946 and ending with the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963. The silent generation came out of this time. Other first turnings are the post-Civil War Reconstruction era and time just after the ratification of the Constitution in the country. The second turning is a time of awakening. This is an era when institutions are attacked in the name of personal and spiritual autonomy. Just when society is reaching its high tide of public progress, people suddenly tire of that social discipline and want to recapture that sense of personal authenticity. This is a time for the activists and the spiritualists. They look at the high from the first turning and see those that were left behind, or ways that it was not working for everyone. America's most recent awakening came from college campuses and inner cities during the revolts of the mid-60s up to the tax revolts of the early 80s. Examples of earlier second turnings include the time around 1900, when we had the labor protests and the suffrage movement, and the transcendental movement, which Henry David Thoreau described as a period when we have lost the world and begin to find ourselves. That defines the second turning. The third turning is a time of unraveling. The mood in this era is in many ways the opposite of a high. Institutions are weak and distrusted, while individualism is strong and flourishing. These unravelings follow the awakenings, which teach the lesson that society must fall apart after they awake to a new way of thinking. America's most recent third turn was the era of Reaganomics and the culture wars, beginning in the early 1980s, and probably, they say, ending in 2008. The era opened with that triumphant morning in America, individualism, and drifted towards a pervasive distrust of institutions and leaders, and the splitting of national consensus into different values camps. My generation, Generation X, came out of this time. And earlier examples of this third turning include the periods around the Roaring 20s, 1920s, of Prohibition and the Mexican War of the 1850s. They were all periods of what the authors call cynicism and bad manners, when civic authority felt weak, social disorder felt pervasive, and the culture felt exhausted. So that leads us to the fourth turning, which is a crisis. This is an era in which America's institutional life is torn down and rebuilt from the ground up, always in response to a perceived threat to the nation's very survival. Civic authority in this turning revives, cultural expression finds a community purpose, and people begin to locate themselves as a member of a larger group. In every instance, fourth turnings have eventually become new founding moments in America's history, refreshing and redefining the national identity. Before now, America's most recent fourth turning began with the stock market crash in 1929, and it climaxed at World War II. The millennials are coming to age in this current fourth turning. Examples of past fourth turnings include the Civil War of the 1860s and the Revolution of the 1770s, both periods of momentous crisis when the identity of the nation hung in the balance. So if you buy into this larger context, which, let's be honest, you're you may or may not, but I think it's pretty compelling. But if you buy into it, we're in the fourth turning. It kind of connects with the song, "In This Great Turning." I don't know if they were quoting Strauss and Howe, but for me, it fits. So fourth turnings always climax with an existential crisis that either destroys the country or results in its renewal. Strauss and Howe say that in the fourth turning, a crisis arises in response to sudden threats that previously would have been ignored or deferred, but which are now perceived as dire. Great worldly perils boil off the clutter and complexity of life, leaving behind one simple imperative: the society must prevail. This requires a solid public consensus, aggressive institutions, and personal sacrifice. So that leaves us now with, where are we in the fourth turning? Are we at the climax point of it yet? Is this our Civil War or Revolutionary War? Scholars suggest that this current fourth turning started in 2008 with the economic recession. So is the climate crisis going to be the peak crisis of this time? What is our boil off point in that? Was it the election of Donald Trump and the extreme polarization of our country? Because honestly, interestingly, half of the country believes that Donald Trump is the downfall of our time, and half believe he's the solution. So I actually don't think this is the climax. What about the next election? Is that going to be it? Is it the pandemic and the resulting unemployment and economic impacts that I don't think that we've even begun to see the beginning of? Is that what is going to bring us to our knees to envision a new social order? Is it the race revolution that I'm glad to see is continuing beyond this summer? Is that it? Can it get worse? Are we at the point where people say that we as a society must knit ourselves together to build a new future? Or does there have to be more before we get there? So this is what I find so hard and frustrating, because we don't know yet. We can't predict what is coming. We can only look back later and go, oh, that's where it all changed. This is the challenge of being intelligent, analytical beings. We're knowledgeable enough to see our past cycles in our history, but we're not omniscient enough to know how our current ones will end up. Here is the thing I know though. We as Unitarian Universalists, we have the opportunity to lead in love through this. I don't know how it will end, but I do know that we'll be talking about this era for the rest of my life. We'll be talking about the pandemic of 2020, and hopefully not the pandemic of the early 2020s. We will be talking about the unraveling and then hopefully the rebuilding of society that is more inclusive and equitable. All of this is a cycle. And we hope that it is a cycle that continues to help us reach for our higher selves to be elevated. And I believe in the role of our liberal faith to be calling people to that higher, more equitable, radical vision. And the time to be clarifying that vision is now, in this fourth turning, the recreating. We need to lead in love. Our congregation is in its own cycle. As Katie was talking about, we have the long or relatively short arc of the congregation's history, depending on how you look at it. We will be 75 years old in 2022. I say we start planning the party now. But a congregation also has a cycle with a minister. In those terms, like Katie says, we are in a new cycle. Last year, our ministry together was a newborn. This year, we are a toddler. Last year was all about me figuring out what was going on here. It took me a few months just to figure out where all the keys went to. I got to know our leadership and more of all of you. We did have a construction project to finish and some financial priorities that needed immediate attention. I got to know the congregation's history as well as its dreams for the future. And you all got to know me a little bit. My personality, my management style, my sense of humor, my family. From my vantage point, and I hope it was from yours too, it was quite the honeymoon. I know that I am more glad to be your minister now than I was even 1 year ago. The newborn glow was there. Now, we did not have a typical first year at all. In fact, I've said that if I knew we were going to have a pandemic, I would have focused the entire first 6 months on just getting to know each and every one of you better. I really thought we'd have more time. But here we are in my second year of ministry with you, of us doing this ministry together. We're toddlers together. We think we know how to walk together, but there will still be missteps and falls as we get used to this walking thing. We know how to do the basics: eat, drink, cry, laugh, and we're working on rounding out our knowledge of each other. I'm able to anticipate changes and make better decisions. I know not to put my hand on the stove because it's hot. But this isn't the time to start running yet. We're still learning how to walk. And the theme of last year, which was Let's Human Together, is still very applicable. By toddlers, we're going to be venturing into new territory, and then we'll need to regroup again. And while I'm settling into seeing new exciting possibilities, the metaphor of freedom, if you will, of being able to walk, I am also keeping in mind that many of you have been walking here for far longer than I have. You've been walking here much longer, and you know way more about how this walking goes than I do. And then, of course, we need to remember that we're all toddling together online, which means that we'll need to do it even more intentionally and with great care and grace with each other. As we toddle together, let's explore the possibilities that we can do during this year. I have hopes and dreams. I hope that we can become an official welcoming congregation in the UUA's new certification program, a continuation of the welcoming that this congregation has already done to welcome our LGBTQ siblings. I have dreams that we can incorporate the Unitarian Universalist Association's Commission on Institutional Change, which is a deep look into our denomination and congregational systems to see where white supremacy culture is entrenched and to see if we can intentionally and lovingly disrupt it. I've seen and heard from you all that we have opportunities to improve our communication. You approved budget for a new website, and we're finding new ways to use technology and social media to connect. And we're going to be finding innovative ways to help welcome new members and to include them into the congregation, reinventing how to do that online. I think the one thing that 2020 has taught us is that we don't have any idea what comes next. But the concept of the turnings gives me hope, because if we look at history, we will get to a point where we have the opportunity to reinvent ourselves as a society. And I have not only hope, but faith, real faith, that we as Unitarian Universalists, as a congregation for our time, as our vision says, for this time, have the opportunity to lead with love and show Phoenix, the United States, the world, how to lead with love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. So might it be.
So let's sing the song that we just heard the UU the Vote Choir sing for us. It's We Shall Be Known by the duo Mamuse. The lyrics will be in the chat. Feel free to sing along or just to listen. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. We shall be known. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. In this great turning we shall learn to lead in love. Thanks all.
Before our closing words, I want to invite you to coffee hour after the service. where there are 2 different coffee hours, and there is an adult one and one for our families. Actually, adults are invited everywhere and families are invited everywhere. But the rooms will be posted in the chat and will be on the final slide. And visitors, we do hope that you will join us. We're a very friendly bunch. And for the kiddos and our families, your coffee hour, I'm going to be going to your coffee hour this week, and Benji will be hosting the other one. And as a reminder, please check on each other, call for other people. My new hashtag is Be Like the Senior Women's Group. Be like them, check on each other, do what it takes to make sure that everyone is okay. In just a moment, we will get to hear that song, We Shall Be Known, one more time, played by our own Colin Booker-Greemy. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. We are turning. How long we'll be spinning, we don't know, but we know that we are needed to show ourselves and each other how to put love at the center of this great turning. Love at the center of the revolution. We need each other, and we need to lead in love. In our congregation, in our families, in our community. So might it be. Go in peace, go in love. Lots and lots and lots of it.